Finally tonight, as promised, a special comment on the 9 days since Tucson. That awful night, I said this: we need to put the guns down. Just as importantly, we need to put the gun metaphors away and permanently. Left, right, middle, politicians and citizens, sane and insane. This age in which this country would accept the, quote, targeting of political opponents and putting bullseyes over their faces, and of the dangerous blurring between political rallies and gun shows, ended. I cited 7 examples of violent rhetoric from the right, only 1 from the left, my own. Because the point of that comment, and this one, was not that the right pulled the trigger in Tucson, but that we as citizens must stop the next Loeffner. And the only way to potentially do this is to accept personal responsibility and to pledge, again, as I said that night, that violence or the threat of violence have no place in our democracy, and I apologize for and repudiate any act or anything in my past that may have even inadvertently encouraged violence. To date, only 1 commentator or politician has expressed the slightest introspection, the slightest self-awareness, the slightest remorse, the slightest ownership of the existence of the fantasy dream cloud of violent language by which we are now nearly blinded. Our political discourse, John McCain wrote in an otherwise steaming serving of Washington Post op-ed partisan flab, should be more civil than it currently is, and we all, myself included, bear some responsibility for it not being so. That's it. 1 individual, 1 assumed any personal responsibility for any of it besides me, John McCain. Not Palin, not Beck, not Limbaugh, not West, not Kanjorski, not Malloy, not O'Reilly, not Angle, not Jesse Kelly, not President Obama. It's me and John McCain. I assume he's like me now, not sure whether to laugh, cry, or be proud of that. So what did everybody else say? They said it was everybody else's fault, and they often said it with more violence than before. On Tuesday, another radio announcer, Mark Levin, wrapped up the case for his audience. We all know without question that the murderer in Tucson was mentally ill, a liberal pothead, and all the rest of it. We know this for a fact. On Tuesday, after Mr. Levin and yet another radio announcer, Michael Savage, were decried for using violent rhetoric, Mr. Savage called this a, quote, blood libel and threatened to sue, seemingly as much for having been linked to Mr. Levin as for having been linked to violent rhetoric. On Tuesday, Tucson Tea Party co-founder Trent Humphreys explained the Gifford shooting to the English newspaper The Guardian. Quote, it's political gamesmanship. The real case is that she had no security whatsoever at this event. James Eric Fuller, one of those wounded at this event, himself a traumatized Vietnam vet who had also incredibly witnessed Kent State, referred to the, quote, Tea Party crime syndicate and said he believed that in the Gifford shooting, it had claimed its, quote, first target. On Saturday, in a decision smacking of the tawdriness of the Maury Povich show, Mr. Fuller was seated in the first row of an ABC News town hall in Tucson with Mr. Humphreys of the Tea Party on the stage, when Humphreys suggested talk of gun control be deferred until after all the victims were buried. Mr. Fuller stood up and started to shout at Humphreys, quote, you're dead. Mr. Fuller was, quite appropriately, arrested and removed for psychological evaluation. He has today apologized, and Mr. Humphreys has said he does not feel threatened necessarily and wants Fuller to get mental help. Nine days have passed, and the willful blindness hasn't even slowed down yet. Besides the total absence of even the glimmer of personal responsibility that Senator McCain and I have evinced, we learn from all this that the right lives in a perpetual state of victimhood. We learn that the right does not even recognize the irony of its claim of being unfairly blamed for the violence of others when it has spent the last several years doing exactly that to Muslims, particularly American Muslims. We also learn that the right can simultaneously insist that no political party or inclination can be blamed for Tucson, while it itself blames the Democratic Party and the left for Tucson. We learn that the right does not understand that if we foment a political environment in which politics are to be settled by violence, or the threat of violence, or in a rhetorical tide of violent imagery, it no longer matters what those politics specifically are, or if the hearer even understands your politics or agrees with your politics. He may hear only the permission to be violent. And ultimately we learn, especially from Mrs. Palin's foolishness, this template of what the right would do in an actual open and shut slam dunk case in which a partisan of the right attempted to kill one of the left. The right would blame the victim, blame him or her for not having brought enough security, or for not having brought a gun